Okay. So, Cloud Testing Solutions Battle Royale. My name is Cosmin Padineanu. I've been working for about over 7 years now as a QA DevOps guy. I did some full stack development, so back-end, front-end, whatever there is. Currently, I'm working as a technical test engineer at Visma Software. In the DevOps team, I do test automation and DevOps. That would be the intro. Around a year and something ago, we were starting a new project, a website, quite simple in the beginning. After building our first few pages and having something up, we realized, okay, we need this stuff tested. We don't want to look over it every time we deploy something or we want to deploy. And since this was heavily front-end, we wanted something that would test our front-end. And because it was responsive, we wanted something that would test it on different devices. And the stakeholders were very strict that it had to be real devices because the users were very high value and few in number. So every user we would lose would be a big loss for the company. So we set up some criteria for our solutions for cloud testing, because we decided you can't host the devices locally and have them up to date with the latest ones. Our clientele was always having the latest devices, and it would be cost prohibitive for us. So we wanted to run the automated test against real devices, have a common automation framework for all of them. So we wanted one framework that runs everything, so desktop, mobile, etc. We wanted to integrate it easily into our CI. Back then it was Jenkins, but it could easily be something else like GhostD or TeamCity. We didn't want to maintain and buy the devices, and we wanted to have manual access to the devices in case we wanted to do some debugging in them and see our issue closer than just a video or just a picture. For that, we did some market research, so you don't really have to read all of this. It's just to highlight the amount of info we had to go through. Each line is a different provider for cloud testing solutions, and each column is one of our criteria. Some of them were price, features, reliability, availability of different devices. If they have different pros and cons, like easy plugin integration with Jenkins, for that time, that's what we were looking into. And after testing all of them thoroughly, we narrowed it down to 3 candidates. One of them was actually eliminated, Sauce Labs. You can see it's the penultimate. It's in red, but I'm still going to present it to see what the difference was, because a lot of people, when they think about cloud testing, the first thing they think about is Sauce Labs, and it might not be the best solution. And the others that remained were browser stack and cross-browser testing. The various others were really not very consistent in their approach on testing on different devices, their reliability, high cost. Some of them were all based in Europe and had really good access time, but the cost was extremely high compared to the others, so they didn't make sense. So the final contenders, Sauce Labs, browser stack, and cross-browser testing, are presented here. So browser stack fulfilled all our criteria needed for solving our problem, and also had acceptable metrics and support, performance, pricing, and reliability. They have had a very good support staff and a lot of people with good knowledge about their product and automated testing in general. Bonus features that made life easier, plugins with integration with Jenkins, APIs to call out test results, videos, screenshots, whatever you wanted out of your account. Another one, cross-browser testing. It had the exact same advantages as browser stack, but it didn't have such good manual access to devices. The response time was pretty slow, and it was hard to simulate things like swiping with the mouse on it and getting the same results. And Sauce Labs fulfilled many of the criteria, but it has a big problem in performance and price. The price is very high and the performance is quite low, especially on mobile iOS devices, because it doesn't have as a default real devices, but emulators that run on Macs, and it needs to start up the Mac first, start the emulator on it, and then it starts your test. And that adds about 2 minutes to each test run. That would take 15-20 seconds normally. Yeah.
And the other solutions use the real devices?
Yes, straight up real devices. Sauce Labs also has the real devices, but they are hiding it. They call it Test Lab. They don't actually tell you in the Sauce Labs page, if you go and check the price, they say, okay, you also get mobile devices, but they're actually emulators, and they don't tell you that. They kind of hide it with an asterisk somewhere on a different page. And if you go there, you realize, okay, they're not real device, and if I want that, the cost skyrockets. And also you have 2 different places to view your test results, which isn't ideal.
And there's a little robots that make the swipes and
no,
taps and...
they're connected through Lightning or USB, and there's an API that does the calls. The device is actually Android, and iOS support this. And you can actually do this with your iPhone on the Mac. You can straight up connect it with Lightning, and you can see it in Safari. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So it's only about
and you can,
applications.
Yeah, and you can control it through Safari, and the same thing can be done for the same API by their cloud, because it's servers with devices connected, real devices. So let's actually try them and see how they run, and what exactly are the pros and cons when you do a test run on them. I actually have in the presentation set up a link to my repo with a simple, very simple, who here has heard about Nightwatch? Okay. Who here has heard about Selenium? Okay, then we have a base to start from. So Nightwatch is just a Selenium framework in JavaScript, in Node.js. Probably the most used, very reliable, and it extends Selenium with some more functionalities, and it handles some more cases like getting stuff out of the page, out of the box more easily. So it's just a framework. So I currently have the framework installed here, and the way you run stuff is through the package JSON. You have a section for scripts, and you can define commands to run Nightwatch tests, basically. And you run npm and the name of the script, and it runs the test you wanted. The tests themselves are very basic, so if you know Selenium, you can pretty much understand syntax. It's just a test to open a Google page, so this is the test case. It opens the demo test, navigates to Google, and it checks if Google is open by checking the page title if it's Google. I didn't want to go into a complex test. That's not the idea of what we present here. So that would be a normal test run, and you can run it locally, and I'm going to do that on my laptop. I have a profile set to run Nightwatch, the basic confile profile. So this one, it will run on, it will run on my local computer. No, this browser stack, sorry, this one, yeah. So this one will run on my computer. You can see the IP and on port 4444. Since I use npm, when I run npm install, I have in my package JSON defined Nightwatch and the Chrome driver and the Selenium server. So when I run a Nightwatch test, because of the local config, it will start the Selenium server, and it will start my Chrome driver. And having those, it will start sending commands to the Selenium server, which will send them to my Chrome driver locally. And now let's run the test. If I remember, this was the name. I'm just running this locally because it's more easier for you to understand that happens. Okay, so it opened Google and it just checked it. This is the normal runtime, 17 seconds for a test locally. This is the best case scenario. So now, I was sending this to my local Selenium server that's installed here and it's started up by npm. When you access a cloud service provider for testing, they have their own Selenium server and many nodes with devices connected to them. And you need to send it there. So for example, for browser stack, you have the browser stack host defined at port 80 and you send your credentials and it just connects there. It knows it's you and it starts sending tests to the server and then to the devices you specified in the list here. For example, I have on browser stack set up a Chrome on Windows, Firefox on Windows, Edge, IE, Safari on Mac OS X, an S8 Plus, a Galaxy Tab, iPhone 8 Plus, iPad 6 Gen, and I have the same things set up for cross-browser testing and Salt Labs. You can see that the browser stack config is a JS. I also set up some JSONs for the other ones, but the JS is the recommended one because you can actually write code in it and have different profiles depending on what kind of parameters you send in the command line you want to run the tests. So you could have a parameter that says that I want just the test suite for the staging environment or the test suite for the dev environment. So the JSON is the old way, but I also wanted to show you it's also the same readable, but just you can't write code here, which is a big downside. So let's run first some browser stack. I'm not actually going to browser stack, yes. So I'm not actually going to straight up run it. I'm going to show you browser stack first. So you just sign in with your account. And you get this UI here, and you can choose which kind of section you want, either live, where you can browse on devices, because this is a test account. From them, I only have access to these, but they have usually the latest devices here, including the latest iPhones, straight up in a month when they get released. You can also have apps installed on real devices. There's a special section for that, and you can automate testing apps using Appium, which is an extension for Selenium for testing applications. But if you want to do web testing automated, you have the automate section, in which you will get all of your test results, the test runs. You have running queues, and you can, depending on your subscription, have more parallel runs available, more devices. This is actually a test account, so it's limited.
This is the free plan?
Yeah, it's the free plan. If you make an account, this is what you get, 5 devices. But on the automated side, you can actually access all of the devices in the runs compared to the manual side where you only have a few. So you can access all of them here in the trial account. This is what I liked a lot from Browser Stack and cross-browser testing. When they give you a trial account, especially on the automation side, you have a lot available. This is our previous runs I did. At the moment, you can see nothing is running, so I'm just going to start up the tests. And you will get from the hub that is running the server, the Selenium server on Browser Stack, you will get an output in your command line, which, of course, if you run the command line in your CI, you'll get the output in the CI and have a nice log of your test run in it. So you can see that the tests have started. Some of them actually have completed already. So the edge apparently is very fast machine. In a test run, at the end, you have a report. You can view how the page looked in certain times in your report. You also have a video for it. You can also, if the test gets stuck somewhere, you can enter the VM live and see stuff in it. That's not what's going to happen here since we just opened Google. You get the logs from Selenium, network logs, console logs, visual logs. You just need to enable them through the config file, whatever you want. If you don't want stuff, if you want the test to run a bit faster, you disable the video because that takes a bit of time to set up and close down. You will get the feedback that the test has successfully stopped before all of the close down procedures happen, but you still need to wait for the startup. So you can see there's an issue with Firefox. I don't know why. It's probably stuck on something. We're gonna see later. So you can have all of them here. You can mark them in different test groups depending and have tags depending on the version of your environment that you run against, everything like that. You can have them straight up in nice groups. This is just a basic config. So you can see it runs quite fast. Let's do the same for cross-browser testing. For cross-browser testing, there's a limit, a small one. Don't see it as a big issue, on how many tests you can run at once if you are a trial account. So I had to split up the config into desktop and mobile just to have not have more than 5 into each run. But if you have a full account, this isn't a problem. So I just will run them quickly on desktop to have them already run. And I won't start mobile until we access actually cross-browser testing. So the UI is very similar. So if you work with one, you can work with the other. So the location in cross-browser testing where you see your results is called Test Center. Again, you have live testing, automation in the same UI, so you don't have to switch pages. It's not a different URL. You don't have to have different methods of interacting with a real device and a simulated one. And here are real devices, all of them. And you can see that a few seconds ago the test already ran. And you also have video of the test running. You have outputs of each response. And you also get a nice console output with colors also. And you can see, yeah, there was an error. Execution for Firefox, I think. Yeah, so that's why it failed. It actually was an error. It rarely happens. So you can see you have really nice results here. And they are split automatically for each device. And let's also run the mobile one. Yeah, you can see they're started, they're queued and running in parallel. You don't get the same way of seeing how many are in parallel than you do in BrowserStack, but it runs just as fine. And again, you can mark them into different groups and group them by build. And they have really good feedback on what you need to do if you want something. So if you want to group by build, you can learn more and you can straight up generate the config file for most of your stuff. Okay, I want something like that, and I also want to record video, and I want other capabilities, and you have a link to them. They have really good documentation, BrowserStack and cross-browser testing. They straight up include your credentials in the config files, so you just copy-paste it. Don't have to manually create it and risk having errors and stuff like that. And they support a lot of frameworks and a lot of languages. Kind of all of the languages are supported by Selenium, are supported by them. because it comes through the WebDriver and they don't care what you guys use as a framework, as a language, because the protocol for communicating is the same in the backend. They have integrations with Jenkins, TeamCD, stuff like that. Again, Appium, all of it. And you can easily do some mockups and run them if you want. The prices are pretty low compared to what you would expect. Some of them are under $200 a month for 2 sessions concurrent. So you can run two tests in parallel, or have 2 people working on live testing in parallel, like designers and stuff like that. They can check their design. Also, what they are capable of, they have simple config executables or bats or whatever that you can start up on inside your network on a machine or something, and they will create a VPN between your account on their servers and the machine in your network, and you can test local environments without actually having them exposed to the internet. As long as your machine in the network has access to them, then you're fine. So for us, we just set up a server, for example, and we had that running in a Docker container. And we didn't care as long as the Docker container was in the same network as our other Docker containers that ran the app. We could test against it. And you didn't have access on the test and integration side from the internet. Okay, so the tests have already finished. You can see we have video recordings, a lot of info on what has also run. You can see what capabilities you set for the driver, for the browser, what capabilities were selected for the OS that they actually selected for you. So if you narrow down your selection, they will exactly give you the version you want for the browsers, for the OS, for even Selenium. But if you don't, they will just pick at random for the versions that you didn't say anything. So if you say, okay, I want OS X, they will give you whatever OS X you want. But if you want, let's say, Mojave, you can specify that. And the last one is Sauce Labs. And Sauce Labs here has a single profile defined. I don't use IntelliJ in light mode. It's just for the presentation. It works better for the projector. Okay. Let me sign in. You're going to notice something weird when I sign in. I'm going to sign in with GitHub account, and this is going to be a story. Why Sauce Labs is not developer friendly. Okay. So here I have my live testing and my automated tests. You can see I had runs previously, and I'm just gonna let me just straight up talk about this. So this is the run for, you can see iOS devices. You can straight up see run times of 1 to 2 minutes, when for the others, all of them were under a minute. That's the emulator starting up. It's not real. And you can see in the run, if you look in the video, that it's actually a Safari open on a Mac. So, but they don't specifically tell you that anywhere. It doesn't say tagged emulator or something. In the config files for the other solutions, you can specify if you want emulators. You can force that. But if you don't, they're going to use the real devices. The emulator is already always an option that they keep in the background. So let's run here. So the test run has started. You'll see here in Sauce Labs that the tests are running. If it decides to actually select the dashboard, yeah. So the tests have already started to run. While they are running, I'm gonna go over why Sauce Labs are excluded. It's what I already said previously. The main point was pricing. So if you go to their pricing page, You can see that unlimited automate with 2 concurrent sessions is $300. The other ones are maximum 200. And it's fake because it's testing on virtual platforms. If you want real devices with 2 sessions, it's 600, 3 times as much as the others. Yes, and that was one of the reasons. The other one was I keep trying this stuff every few months for different projects and demoing it. And because the time runs out on the test accounts, I have to create new ones. I never had a problem with browser stack or cross-browser testing. I can create as many as I want. But Sauce Labs detects my IPs and blocks me. At one point, it was this really weird block where their Nginx just threw out a 500 error with just some text on the page. And I figured out it's my IP just because I tried it with a VPN and it worked. And now they just deactivate your account straight after you create it. So they're not very developer friendly. They hide their resources behind fancy words. And also I have used them with a full account, and the runtime with the full account is a lot worse than the runtime with the testing account. Because they probably set up the best and fastest resources for the test account to get you in. So you think it runs that fast, but it won't run that fast. Similar slowdown happens with browser stack and cross-browser testing also. They're trying to put their best foot out the door first and show you good speed. It's not that amazing after, but it's not as bad as Sauce Labs. Sauce Labs, for example, from a few tens of seconds, you could get to minutes, and the others will be from 15, 20 seconds, maybe to 30. The runtime would increase. I think the resources that they use for the test accounts are specifically set aside, and they don't get targeted that much. Okay, so these are the reasons why Sauce Labs didn't encourage us at all. Also, the documentation is pretty lacking. It's pretty spread out. They don't have their documentation in order to have a complete test run with all you want from a single page. You have to go into different places in documentation and search and copy paste bits of configurations from here and there. It's not very friendly. And you can see also in the output, yeah, it's fine. It's colored, everything is good, but what am I running on? Can somebody figure out which run was on which device? Because I can't. Yeah, they don't really give you all of the info you need. They kind of try to hide it. They figure you aren't good enough to understand it anyway or something like that. So it's not a very good solution. I can continue bashing Sauce Labs, but that wouldn't be very constructive. Going back to cross-browser testing and browser stack, the only thing that set them apart was the speed of the manual testing. Browser stack was very close to what you would encounter in a real device using it in your hand. So like you can do a swipe and see the gesture running on the screen and the screen reacting in almost real time, where cross-browser testing was very, very slow. So that was for us, and we also wanted our designer to have access to see the website being developed while he was changing the designs and stuff like that. It helped a lot. So going back to the presentation, that was the demo. We ran on iOS Safari, Android, different devices, tablets, phones, on Mac, on Windows, desktop, and that was the demo. So our choice was browser stack, just based on that, and we were pretty happy. I used it for a few months until I left the project, and I still recommend it to other projects, and I hear that they also have decided on the same solution after looking into some of them themselves. Yeah. So the conclusion is, if you want to just start up with something, I would recommend browser stack or cross-browser testing. But if you want to look into a solution yourself, you really need to define the requirements that you need to have and the ones that would be nice to have, and have clear parameters for them. So cost up to, response time up to, we said up to a minute because the test runs locally were 17-20 seconds. We said they couldn't exceed 1 minute. You can define exactly why you need to do this with your stakeholder, because this will cost money. It's one of those things where you make a website, you have some hosting in AVS, very cheap, and you use everything open source, so everything is free, and suddenly somebody comes and says there's a bill and you have to start up a credit card with something, and all the stakeholders look, okay, now we need to pay for this. Why? And then you have to show them, okay, we can't do this manually, we can't have all of those devices because each of them costs $1,000 now, and they change every 4 to 6 months, and with the money from one device we can sponsor an entire year of testing or something, or 6 months of testing. So yeah, then they don't see that as a cost anymore, and they see it as an opportunity to improve something.
As a cost reduction. Yeah,
as a cost reduction. So here are some links for me. Now, since it's a story, I expect some questions, because most probably you have specific things in mind when you think, okay, now I have an app or website or something that I want to test. How could I use this?
Do you also test native applications?
Yes, that's why there is a section for testing App Live and App Automate. The only issue is you can't straight up run the code that you would run on a web app in pure Selenium against a real application. You have to use something called Appium, which is a fork of Selenium, and it extends it with all the necessary tooling to run commands against an application. But it's very widely used, it's industry standard, and if you start using Appium, all of the platforms support it.
Is it in the same plan as using the browser, or do you have to pay extra?
For the devices, you can use common devices, but then they need to get set up and cleaned after each test, and you're kind of responsible for the setup to make your test run, and they clean them after, and it takes a bit longer to run. But you can also ask them to reserve a device for you. So you can actually not clean it that often and have it on demand ready for you against the price. So the prices differ there. They're usually more expensive, a few times more expensive when you do that. Let's just check. I haven't checked it in a while. So this is the normal browser stack pricing. When we went with automated mobile with 2 parallel users, and that was $300 a month. And if you go to app testing and you go to choose 2 parallel tests, it's $400. But if you want reserved devices, you have to talk to them, and they will offer you a quote depending on what device you want, because it costs them to buy them, and then they have to they have different prices for them.
Do you know if those devices, if you don't have something reserved, are they all crowded, so you have to wait until something happens?
Usually, yeah, you do have to wait. There's a pool of devices, and it tells you how much the wait time is. It really depends on the traffic at that period. But it's not anything very serious. So it's in minutes, not hours, minutes. It really depends on what device you target. If it's something that is not very used, or they have a lot of copies of, then you're fine.
How many devices do these guys have?
Tens of thousands in different clusters around the globe. So if you run in Europe, they have a cluster here, so you have decent access times. If you run in US, they have a cluster there. It's really big business, cloud testing, yeah. Real devices. It's really big business. They buy thousands. Yeah, they buy thousands of devices constantly. But if you can imagine, they make the money back quite easily with a subscription.
And how do you get your application, for instance, for iOS? Do you send them the build, or do they install it through App Store, or how do you?
You can load it on the app if you want, but you can also have it through the App Store, which is the easiest solution, especially on iOS. On Android, you can easily sideload it if you want. You have access to the device. If you have the device reserved, it's even easier then. They have APIs for everything, so whatever you think about, they have a solution to.
And Appium is the only way to...
Currently, as the only one supported everywhere, and I would really recommend you look into using a framework and a solution that's supported everywhere, because if you want to switch provider ever, it's going to be a hassle to rewrite everything and nobody will want to do it. So something like the framework is more easily supported everywhere, multiple versions, like for browser stack, you have C#, JavaScript, and there's multiple frameworks, Nightwatch, Cucumber, whatever. And those you have a lot of choice from, but on the App Automate side, it's usually Appium, the only solution that's supported everywhere. So they also have integration with stuff like Jira, Trello, Slack, stuff like that. You can have bots send you information in your Slack, or you can go and into a test and straight up create an issue in your Jira. If you can log in, for example, and create an issue there through the API. So they have pretty much integrated it into the CI, their solutions. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Any other questions?
Do you get like I don't know, let's say a history of the length of the test run, of the durations?
To compare them between each other?
Yeah,
or? Not as far as I know. There might be a way for the API, but I haven't searched for it. You don't have that out of the box anyway locally through Selenium, so they would have to build it. Where I work at the moment, I work for Visma. We have a CI in Team City, and the tests run we only serve Chrome. We're lucky in that, very lucky, because our customers are business. And we have a CI in Docker containers in Kubernetes, and we have built our own way of gathering test metrics and comparing them against each other, but we had to do that manually. I don't know if their API offers that for you. Of course, these accounts aren't one-person account. You can have corporate accounts and add persons to the same account with their own logins. So it's all extendable as every platform. Any other questions? Then I guess that's it. Thank you very much for your time.